welcome back. As with any revolution, even the people who are pioneering it to begin with will eventually have their heads on the block. And as we see with Mark Zuckerberg, with Facebook to tag harmful posts as boycott widens, the Stop Hate for Profit movement has of course been gaining steam. Now he's dropped 7% value in his shares on Facebook because of the boycott. 99% of their revenue comes from advertisements, of course. And the Stop Hate for Profit narrative is annoyed that Facebook allows people freedom of speech, even though it doesn't. Not completely. But it isn't enough for them. And even as Mark Zuckerberg has tried to point out that the European Commission report this month found Facebook removed 86% of hate speech last year, up from 82.6%, but of course there's still another 14% that isn't good enough. And of that 14% of hate speech, we don't know which side it goes upon. Of course, it's very difficult to have something branded hate speech if it's against straight white men, in particular, or against Christians or conservatives, for example. But there is a chance that it could still be branded hate speech. That is not something Stop Hate for Profit cares about, not at all. They're predominantly going for the Black Lives Matter, defund the police narrative, as of course Ben and Jerry's love to mention as well, as they tweet out. But you have got quite a few participating businesses to boycott Facebook. As we see here, they've got their list that they say, inclusion on this list is not an endorsement by Stop Hate for Profit or its partners of the organizations commercially or politically. So the businesses support Stop Hate for Profit. Stop Hate for Profit does not support the businesses, basically. And these are the names here. Mainly the smaller tech companies, but there are some outdoor companies as well. There's even Honda, of course. So it's not all Californian. You've got Japanese here as well. Of course, we've got Mozilla, as we all know, Patagonia, the outdoor company, the North Face as well, as we see Verizon, as to be expected. And as the BBC says, why are companies boycotting Facebook? So they say the Stop Hate for Profit campaign was started by US civil rights group after the death of George Floyd in May while in police custody. It is focused on Facebook, which also owns Instagram and WhatsApp, and last year attracted advertising revenue of almost $70 billion. The organisers, which include Colour of Change and the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, I thought it was supposed to be people of colour now. You know, it's got to a good point where they have to change their brand names because the acronyms are now offensive, have said Facebook allows racist, violent and verifiably false content to run rampant on its platform. More than 90 companies, including Verizon and Patagonia, have joined the campaign, according to a list by ad activism group Sleeping Giants, one of the organisers. And I doubt most of these companies that have joined in actually understand what Sleeping Giants stands for. But of course they say racist, violent and verifiably false content to run rampant on its platform, as well as, of course, that Stop Hate for Profit says that Facebook named Breitbart News a trusted news source, and they made the Daily Caller a fact-checker, despite both publications having records of working with known white nationalists. Yes, that trying to have a right-leaning fact-checker as well, in order to try and balance things out, that yes, you can have two, but no, you can't even have two, because now we're going to say that they've got records of working with white nationalists, and of course they're evil, and instead the Facebook have turned a blind eye to blatant voter suppression on their platform. I think they're talking about the Russia collusion narrative, which at most influenced a couple of thousand people. Could they protect and support black users? Could they call that Holocaust denial as hate? Could they help get out the vote? Well, calling out something as hate, I don't think really matters. If you got an American company, then they've got their First Amendment rights. Facebook wants to be a platform instead of a publisher, in which case, unless it breaks the law, it can still stay up. Mark Zuckerberg is also trying to say that if you've got media reporting on things, then it should be fair enough for people to be able to find the source on Facebook that the media outlets got it from and read it for themselves. But, of course, that's not enough. And what's even better is that Stop Hate for Profit has seemingly no idea of what Project Veritas has been doing in showing their Facebook insiders to have a very, very strong political bias and an anti-conservative bias, and will flag and get rid of conservative posts. And also, in terms of voter manipulation, the way it works in order to try and be legal is, of course, that they have their algorithms that can understand where you fall on the political spectrum. Fair enough. And as they have done in the 2016 election, they will then find out who you're most likely to support. If you're a conservative, they will leave you to it. If you're a Democrat, then they will tell you, hey, today's voting day, make sure to get out and vote. And that is how they get around it. So they will only tell the left-leaning individuals when voting day is and to get out and vote, and they will not mention anything to the right-leaning people because it wouldn't be of interest to them. That's what our algorithm has determined. It's just not profitable and it doesn't make sense to advertise this to those users. That is how they do voter manipulation in a more legal way through use of their algorithms. But of course it gets even more in-depth than that, as James O'Keefe has shown. So, as O'Keefe tweeted, breaking, Facebook Insider records co-workers' anti-Trump content moderation practices. Prepared to testify over Facebook political bias. If someone is wearing a MAGA hat, I'm going to delete them for terrorism. From Lau Kantakos, content moderator. Stephen Grimmett, team leader for content review at Facebook, said that Facebook is a very progressive company who's very anti-Make America Great Again. Daniel Will, content moderator at Facebook, admitted that the social media giant censors Trump material in the form of shadow banning, the act of blocking or partially blocking the user or the user's content from an online community that is not readily apparent to the user who posted the content, if you needed a reminder. Mark Zuckerberg has been accused in the past of holding anti-conservative views, and a report conducted by Senator John Kyle and law firm Covington & Burling LLP, which was released in August of 2019, showed that it was true that Facebook did have an anti-conservative bias. And when Facebook began cracking down on Facebook pages that were meant to organise protests amid the outbreak of COVID-19, with states installing draconian measures that many felt were violation of their rights, so stopping them from being able to get together. And of course, the idea of Facebook's anti-conservative bias hit home with members of the Facebook staff staging a walkout after Zuckerberg refused to limit the number of controversial posts from President Donald Trump. Designed to be a platform, not a publisher. I know that Twitter is trying to label Trump's tweets as well, but if you want platform protections so that you can't be sued for what somebody says because you have far too many users to understand what everybody is saying, you don't want to be held accountable for it. That also means they have their First Amendment protections and you can't ban them or censor them. But that's been the fallout. So I'm thinking that a lot of the companies, the participating businesses that you can see here, don't actually understand what is going on. But of course, don't want to be told that, hey, you're profiting from hate because, you know, hate for profit sounds terrible. And clearly that everybody else who doesn't get on board with it must enjoy hate. That's definitely what they stand for. And again, it just comes down to leftist language games. You could easily flick it the other way and say, well, we don't like hate either. And if you're going against conservatives, we find that to be hateful. Christians, we find that to be hateful. Men, we find that to be hateful. So the very one-sided blocking way of doing things is also intended to get rid of any criticism for the actions of Stop Hate for Profit, because if anybody tries to call them out and say, well, hey, this seems very one-sided and you're not looking at the whole picture, then they're going to say, well, that's hateful, you see, you're clearly racist because we're only doing good things, we are only good and you are only bad, and therefore you should be silenced and censored and nobody should hear what you have to say because you're a bad person. And that is how they get around these things. But no matter what Zuckerberg does, it's never going to be enough, so almost sympathize with him for trying to have some more free speech, and as he said in an interview not so long ago that he does value free speech. Whether or not that was just him paying lip service or if that's something he actually holds true to is yet to fully be determined, given his latest actions that he's trying to appease everybody, which is of course impossible. And at some point I'm sure he's probably just gonna just sell and leave because nobody wants to be in that no-win situation. And if you've already got enough profit and live conservatively, financially conservatively, then by all means drop out because it's too much for anyone to be able to handle, and go over to Parler instead. And until next time, have a good one.